3 weeks ago, Ellen told me about a dream she had. Now, like a lot of dreams, it didn't make much rational sense. She and I were married, but her children were very young. In reality, I did not meet Ellen until her kids were already teenagers. She also, in this dream, had a dog, Pearl, the Wonder Westie, when in reality, we've had Pearl for 10 years. So, this dream, like most dreams, it did not play by the normal rules of time and place. What was more important was how the dream felt. In the dream, Ellen had bought a bunny as a gift for her daughter, Natalie. Now, even though in real life, Pearl loves to chase and to traumatize innocent bunnies, so getting a bunny with Pearl around would not be a great idea. We've had that talk with Pearl about not being such a bully, but she was bred to be a hunter of cute woodland creatures. So, what are you going to do? In the dream, that was only one point of anxiety. Would Pearl be nice to the bunny, or would she be very mean to the bunny? And would Natalie be upset by that? Yeah. On top of that, Elle had somehow misplaced her oldest child, Kent. So she was searching and searching for poor Kent. But that's not all. In the dream, it was Christmas time, and the Christmas tree at home was completely devoid of ornaments. The ornaments you see had been given to the kids when they had grown up, which in real life they had. But in this dream, the kids were still little kids, and on one level she knew that. So the whole thing it made no sense at all. Was the bunny safe? Where was Kent? What to do about the tree? And why were grown people now children? Or were they? That's how dreams go, confusing and irrational. As she told me about that dream, we agreed it was obviously an anxiety dream. Strong feelings we have about stuff happening in the everyday world become deeply internalized, and in the helter-skelter logic of dreams, when our subconscious is set free to rummage through our memories, those feelings are acted out with us playing the very confused main character. So, what was happening in the real world when Ellen had that dream? Well, let's see. That week, a large mob of people burst into the U.S. Capitol to overturn the results of an election. A group of folks who believe in conspiracies about child sacrifice, cannibalism, satellites being controlled by Jewish billionaires shooting laser beams that start forest fires, and who are convinced that they are the only true patriots, and militant white supremacists, some of who have promised to commit more acts of violence, insurrection, and terrorism. People move to do things like taking a pole with an American flag on it to beat up a police officer and threaten to execute politicians they think are disloyal. And some of the very people who sympathize with this crowd and make excuses and rationalizations for that kind of behavior actually serve in Congress. So that's been our reality, even though that reality feels more like a nightmare come true, confusing and irrational. Now, if I were to stop right now and ask you to share the kinds of dreams you've had these past few weeks, we'd be here all day talking about some pretty wild and anxious visions. I've learned that for me, in order to get a good night's sleep, I cannot look at the news the day right before going to bed. I need to read something every night for at least half an hour or so that just takes my mind to a different, more peaceful landscape than the weirdness of our reality. So that's why right now I'm really into Nancy Drew mysteries. On the other hand, I'm not sure that that kind of escapism does a whole lot of good for anyone but me. As much as the news might occasionally get me down, I already know very well, or at least I trust, that deep down people are and they can be good and noble. Because right alongside the real world stuff that can be really troubling, we also see plenty of evidence of people really helping each other and working for peace and justice and common sense. And I believe that as much as we do face challenging times, ultimately we're up to the task, that we have plenty of work to do, but that important work will get done. And in the big picture of our life together, we will chart a path toward healing and wholeness. But if anxiety ever haunts our dreams, there's a reason for that. As unpleasant as it is, we should be paying attention when things that upset us during the daylight hours intrude upon our sleep. It's as if our subconscious is telling us, look, bud, this is a problem. It's causing a lot of stress. So your three options are: one, try to ignore it and bury it deeper and hope it goes away. Two, fixate on it to the point of obsession and worry whether your next door neighbor is someone you should avoid at all costs. Or three, find some constructive way to journey through it. The feelings we have, the anxiety, is very real. It's not something we should downplay. So we should be asking, what can I do about it? Of course, feeling like events are so huge and beyond our control can be a major source of anxiety in itself. That's why a lot of people ask me, but what can I do about it? Because it doesn't feel like there's much that any one person is capable of doing to change our world for the better. I disagree. I believe the social and political fracturing that's occurred in recent years boils down to a spiritual disconnect. As much as it feels like we are hyper-connected these days through the internet and social media, the great irony is the very architecture of those tools that connect us to our friends and that make being online so useful and fun, the algorithms that bring us our news feeds and search results, are custom tailored to suit our personal bias in order to garner more clicks, more views, and earn more money. We are the product, and to maximize the revenue made off of you and me, what we digest is incredibly personalized because it is valuable. And any news that we consume and watch is heavily laced with as much opinion as fact. So we're increasingly herded into a curated collection of people and ideas that we already like and that we already agree with. It's like being shrink-wrapped into an echo chamber that affirms our opinions are always right. We're limited in our exposure to points of view that might challenge our thinking. At its most extreme, people consume and come to believe absolute lies. And when you're only surrounded by those voices that profit from those lies and who tell you anything else is not to be trusted, then you are living in a dreamlike alternate reality. You're disconnected, and yet you feel very connected to a community of people who share that same alternate reality. Now, that does not mean that people are gullible fools. It just means it's very hard for anyone to break free of something that creates a strong bond of identity and meaning and belonging. And there's nothing inherently wrong about finding identity, meaning, and belonging. After all, that's a major positive aspect of belonging to a church. But it's a huge problem when that causes people to be disconnected from others so profoundly. When someone else's truth that you believe to be a lie is a matter of life and death, that's called a cult. When that happens, the preservation of your identity, meaning, and belonging becomes more important than being open to considering other points of view. And then the normal social guardrails of civility and respect and dialogue, they disappear. I think that's exactly why we're witnessing such social division. It's a disconnect, and I believe it's spiritual, because at our core, we are spiritual beings who just happen to inhabit physical bodies. And the anxiety we feel comes from knowing at a deep level that the person we watch on the news or in a video feed who's so angry and screaming nonsense and causing mayhem, a person we look at and wonder, what planet are they from? We know that person is also a spiritual being that we should feel connected to rather than repulsed by. On my own long spiritual journey as a Christian, and it is a journey I'll be traveling all my life, I've become more and more convinced that who I am is inextricably bound up in who you are, and that the human family is just that. It's a family. When Jesus spoke about loving your neighbor as yourself, he didn't mention any exceptions to that rule, did he? No. When he told of a man who stops and tends to the wounds of a stranger who was supposed to be his enemy, he didn't say the wounded man needed to first convert to a certain way of thinking. When Jesus becomes the vessel of God's power and spirit to heal and restore a life, that power and spirit didn't first check to make sure that the person was worthy of being healed. They were all worthy. simply because they were inherently valuable human beings. God didn't bother to check to make sure anyone Jesus made whole again had first said all the right words. There was no test, no confession to make. If we learn anything from Jesus, it's that the disconnect we feel from anyone is the opposite of how God designed us to live with each other in love. Any distinctions we make about our ethnicity, race, gender, our nationalities and creeds and religions, now they are important in the sense of appreciating our unique experiences. We need to respect that uniqueness. We should absolutely love it. When we have the chance to meet and learn from people who are different from us, we should delight in that. We also need to rediscover and celebrate the much larger reality of what knits us together. We're each a piece of the whole, a thread in a much bigger tapestry. Our destinies are bound up together. Far too often, we make the mistake of our different colors and textures as being dividing lines, but that's an illusion. In a spiritual sense, those subtle distinctions are just the creative variations on the big spectrum of humanity that God has created. That is why it pains us so much for there to be a break in that continuum. That's why it hurts when we witness division, knowing that we should be in this together, knowing that we ought to have each other's back. That's why our dreams are haunted by anxiety and why our waking hours can be flooded with dread. What can we do about that? I think we are doing something. Whenever we awaken to our spiritual connection with one another and we do all we can to nurture and strengthen it. I know that sounds like a tall order, given the sheer scale of the divisions and the deep disconnect we're suffering from. It might feel like we're too small and too insignificant to make an impact. That is simply not true. We are making an impact. By gathering together and sharing in this moment and taking this spiritual energy and light and love out into our world. We're doing something by learning about those who feel angry and forgotten and threatened, listening to their fears, and discovering how they can be reconnected to the spirit of love that connects us all together. Finding that one common bond, that one shared thread in the spiritual fabric that knits us. And doing that one person at a time. We have plenty of work to do. But since we are connected, any positive step we make strengthens the whole. Entire world-changing movements had their beginnings with only a few dedicated people. That in itself is proof of our connectedness. What did Margaret Mead say? Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And what did Jesus say? A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You're also to love one another. There are no conditions, no qualifiers, and no barriers to that love. There is no disconnect. Only the truth that God created us to love and calls us to love. That's what we do. That's the reality in the midst of our waking hours, and it is God's dream for all of us to make real.